It was a gray, rainy afternoon in the heart of the Bronx. The sky was a blanket of heavy clouds, and the streets reflected the glistening sheen of water. At the bus stop, a group of elderly men and women huddled together, their coats pulled tight against the cold wind. There was a quiet frustration in the air, though no one dared to voice it until a familiar figure appeared in the distance. Zohran Mamdani, a man known for his courage in tackling issues head-on, approached with an umbrella in hand. As he neared, he could hear the soft murmurs of the group, their voices tinged with irritation. "The buses aren't coming on time anymore," one woman remarked, her voice trembling from the chill. "They've reduced the services, and now we're stuck out here for longer." Zohran stopped in his tracks, surveying the scene. These were the people whose voices often went unheard in the hustle and bustle of city life. They were the unsung heroes of everyday existence, yet they had been let down by a system that should have been working for them. Without hesitation, Zohran opened his umbrella and moved closer to the group. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone calm but urgent. He knew that this wasn't just about buses. This was about the dignity of people whose needs had been ignored for far too long. "They cut the bus schedules and now we're stuck waiting," an older man explained, his eyes narrowed with frustration. "It's not fair, especially for us. We depend on this." Zohran nodded, understanding the deeper implications of this issue. It wasn't just about a bus delay. It was about how the elderly were often sidelined in decision-making processes. The city had failed to recognize their needs, and now they were paying the price. He looked around at the faces of the group, their expressions a mix of concern and resignation. They didn't just want the buses to come on time. They wanted to feel seen, heard, and valued. Zohran felt a pang of determination rising within him. "This isn't right," he said firmly, standing tall. "I'm going to talk to the city council. I'll make sure you get the services you deserve." The group fell silent for a moment, processing his words. Then, one by one, they nodded in agreement. Zohran smiled, holding up the umbrella higher to shield them from the rain. He knew this wasn't the end of the fight. It was just the beginning. As the minutes passed and the rain began to intensify, Zohran stayed by their side, listening intently to their stories. He made promises, not just about buses, but about their rights. He wasn't just a politician. He was their voice. The following week, things changed. Zohran had kept his word. Additional bus services were scheduled, and the elderly residents of the neighborhood were no longer left waiting in the cold and rain. For them, it wasn't just about the buses. It was about feeling respected and cared for by the community. Small issues can make a big difference. Zohran Mamdani had proven that one person's action could ripple out and change lives. The elderly at that bus stop no longer felt invisible. They had been heard, and they had their hero. Stay tuned, as Zohran continues to challenge the systems that often leave the most vulnerable behind. Your voice matters too. Do you believe that small actions can create real change? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to stay updated with more powerful stories like this. The rain had stopped, but Zohran Mamdani knew the real work had only just begun. While the extra bus services had made an immediate difference for the elderly in his community, he knew that one change, no matter how important, wasn't enough to address the broader issues they faced every day. Zohran spent the next few days meeting with local officials, discussing not just the bus schedules but the long-term needs of the community. He was relentless in his pursuit of justice, pushing for reforms that would address the underlying problems: affordable public transportation, better access to health care, and improvements to the housing conditions in the area. These were not just policy proposals to Zohran. They were promises he had made to the people who had trusted him to speak up for them. As he walked through the neighborhoods, Zohran noticed how many of the elderly were still struggling. Many were alone, their families far away, with only the unreliable bus services to get them to doctor's appointments or visit family. The buses weren't just a convenience, they were their lifeline. And Zohran understood that. He knew that for every small change, there would be bigger challenges ahead. But the fight for those who had been ignored for too long was worth it. It was what drove him every day. One afternoon, as Zohran was leaving a town hall meeting, he was stopped by an elderly woman in a wheelchair, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Zohran," she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "You kept your word. The buses are here on time now, and we're not stuck in the rain anymore. You really listened." Zohran smiled, bending slightly to meet her gaze. "It's my job to listen," he said. "But this is just the beginning. I'm not going to stop until every person in this city, no matter their age or background, gets the care and support they deserve." She nodded, a smile of hope spreading across her face. "Keep fighting for us." As Zohran continued his journey, the weight of the responsibility he carried felt both heavy and empowering. He wasn't just fighting for the elderly at that bus stop. He was fighting for an entire community that had been overlooked for too long. The promise he had made was simple: to listen, to act, and to create lasting change. But in a city full of bureaucratic hurdles and budget constraints, he knew that making a difference would require more than just determination. It would take the support of the community and the courage to challenge the status quo. And as Zohran looked ahead, he was more certain than ever that real change wasn't just possible. It was inevitable. But to make it happen, he needed everyone to stand with him. Have you ever felt that your voice wasn't heard? Do you think politicians really listen to their communities? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the people who are making change happen. Zohran Mamdani's resolve was tested every day. Though the additional bus services had been implemented, the real challenges lay in sustaining those changes and pushing forward with his vision for the community. He had started a movement, but the fight was far from over. He knew that systemic problems couldn't be solved with quick fixes. They required long-term commitment, collaboration, and, most importantly, the courage to face opposition head-on. One evening, Zohran found himself standing before a crowded city council meeting. The room buzzed with voices, a mixture of supporters and detractors. The mayor, who had initially been resistant to his ideas, was now reluctantly considering Zohran's proposals for further transportation improvements. But the battle was far from won. There were business leaders, local developers, and even some political allies who viewed Zohran's stance as a threat to their interests. They worried that expanding public services would cost them too much and disrupt their influence. As the debate raged on, Zohran listened intently. He knew this was a pivotal moment. The decisions made here could shape the future of his community, maybe even the future of the entire city. Finally, when it was his turn to speak, Zohran stood tall, his voice unwavering. "We've heard from the people, the elderly, the working-class families, the children who rely on public transportation every day. These aren't just numbers on a budget sheet. These are real lives, lives that have been neglected for too long." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. The room grew quieter, as though everyone knew this moment was more than just a speech. It was a call to action. "There's a saying," Zohran continued, "small issues can make a big difference. These bus schedules, these basic services, they matter. And they don't just matter to a few, they matter to everyone." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, but Zohran could feel the resistance in the air. He pressed on. "If we continue to prioritize corporate interests over human ones, we're ignoring the very people who make this city function. We're ignoring our neighbors, our families, our seniors, the ones who need us most. That's not the kind of city I want to live in, and that's not the kind of city I want to represent." His words had weight. They carried the frustration of years of waiting, the anger of being ignored, and the hope for something better. Zohran wasn't just talking about buses anymore. He was talking about justice, equity, and the need for change on a larger scale. And then came the challenge. The mayor stood up, shaking his head, and made a public counteroffer. "We understand your concerns, Zohran, but we're not in a position to approve such sweeping changes without further studies and budget adjustments. You'll have to wait." The room fell silent. For a brief moment, Zohran's heart sank, but he knew this was exactly what the opposition wanted: to stall, to delay, and to let the momentum fade. Zohran wasn't going to let that happen. "You want studies?" Zohran said, his voice rising. "I'll give you results. I've already proven that when we listen to the people, we can make change happen. So let's stop talking about studies and start making real decisions." The room shifted again, as murmurs spread through the crowd. Zohran wasn't backing down. He had earned the trust of the people, and he wasn't going to let the system shut them out again. He walked out of that meeting with more determination than ever. The battle was far from won, but Zohran knew that every small victory, every moment of resistance, only strengthened his resolve. Change was coming, and no one could stop it. Do you think we should prioritize public services over business interests? What do you believe is the true responsibility of our leaders? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on more stories of people who are challenging the status quo. The city council meeting had shaken Zohran, but it had also ignited a fire within him that could not be extinguished. For all the resistance, the bureaucracy, and the politicians who cared more about preserving the status quo than serving the people, Zohran knew something crucial. He wasn't alone. He had the support of the people who truly mattered: the elderly who had waited too long, the working-class families struggling to make ends meet, the everyday citizens who believed in fairness, equality, and the power of community. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, protests, petitions, and tireless campaigning. Zohran worked alongside community leaders, activists, and everyday citizens, all united by one common goal: to demand the services they deserved. But the fight wasn't easy. The mayor and his allies were digging in their heels, trying to delay any progress, hiding behind the excuse of more studies and financial feasibility. It was during this time that Zohran encountered an unexpected twist. A group of local business owners who had originally opposed his efforts suddenly reached out to him. "Zohran," one of them said, "we didn't understand before, but we're seeing now that this is bigger than just a bus schedule. It's about making this city work for everyone, not just the few." Zohran was taken aback. For so long he had seen the business community as an obstacle, but now, here they were, acknowledging the truth. They had finally realized that a city where everyone was thriving, where the elderly could rely on public transport, where working families didn't have to worry about being left behind, was a city that would benefit everyone, including them. With this newfound support, Zohran felt the wind shift. Public opinion began to swing in his favor, and even some members of the city council, who had initially rejected his ideas, started to come around. But Zohran wasn't content with just a few allies. He knew that this was a battle for the people, and he needed their voices to be heard loud and clear. So, Zohran took to the streets. He met with residents, organized rallies, and held town halls where citizens could speak directly to him, sharing their frustrations, their hopes, and their dreams. The message was always the same. They wanted a city that cared for its people. They wanted a city that didn't leave its most vulnerable citizens behind. One rainy afternoon, after weeks of relentless work, Zohran found himself back at the same bus stop where it had all started. The rain was heavier now, the clouds dark and heavy above. As he stood there, watching the buses pull up on time, a group of elderly people approached him, their faces filled with gratitude. "Zohran," one of them said, "you did it. The buses are on time, and we're not waiting in the rain anymore. We don't know how to thank you." Zohran smiled. It was moments like this that made all the struggle, all the sleepless nights, and all the opposition worth it. This wasn't about him. It was about the people who had trusted him to make a difference. "It was all of us," he replied. "We made this happen together." But the work wasn't over. As Zohran looked around at the faces of the community, he knew that this was just the beginning. The bus schedules were restored, yes, but now it was time to tackle the bigger issues: the affordable housing crisis, the lack of accessible health care, and the ongoing fight for workers' rights. Zohran had started a revolution of sorts, one that would continue to gain momentum, fueled by the people's desire for fairness and justice. And so, Zohran Mamdani became a symbol of hope and resilience in his community. A man who had stood in the rain with the elderly, who had listened to their complaints, and who had fought tirelessly to make their lives better. He had shown that even the smallest issues could be the catalyst for enormous change. He had proven that one voice, standing up for what's right, could change the course of a community, and perhaps even an entire city. Zohran had been the hero they needed. And now, as the buses arrived on time and the rain began to fade, it was clear. Change had come. Will we continue to fight for the rights of the people who need it most? Will we stand up when the system lets us down? Let us know what you think in the comments. Your voice matters, and together, we can make change happen. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on stories of real change.